So I think this is where we're up to, page 115. At the very top, all other midot.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to recap very quickly, we were speaking about the soul and its two sides, the side of fire and the side of water in the soul. And they are two opposites, just like fire and water. The side of the soul that represents fire is the side of the soul that wants to yearn and wants to leave this world, so to speak, that has those 4 levels or 4 expressions of yearning that he was speaking about before. The side of the soul that is represented by water is a side of the soul that does not want to satisfy itself by divorcing itself from this world. Quite the opposite, by engaging itself in this world, by doing a good deed, by doing a mitzvah that includes materialism, this physical aspect of this world. And in a way, it's hard, and we were speaking about that, it's hard to dissect which of the two sides we have to follow. Sometimes the soul wants us to follow the water side, and the evil inclination comes and says, no, go and meditate, as if you're following the fiery side, but really your job right now and then is to follow the water side. So we were speaking a lot about these two sides last week, and how to be in tune with the desire of the soul, whether it wants to be on the soul, on the water side, so to speak, on the fire side. So that's just to recap. Let's continue here on page 115, where the Tanya will continue to speak about those two sides of the soul, maybe in slightly different terms. Does anyone want to read? All other midot are all offshoots of awe and love. Anyone?
I got it.
Please.
All other midot are all offshoots of awe and love and their derivations, as is explained elsewhere. Love and awe are the two fundamental midot in the soul, the two poles that impel the soul along all its emotive paths. Love is the movement from self outward, the drive for self-expansion, the breaching of the boundaries that separate the self from the other, the will to influence and give without limit. Awe, on the other hand, is an inward movement, the soul's self-contraction, its withdrawal and withholding from others, its capacity to set parameters and confine itself to them. Thus, love and awe define the two directions of the soul, expansion and contraction, giving and refraining from giving. The third primary midah, rachamim, compassion, which is giving to one who needs, is a composite of love and awe, an intermediary between unequivocal giving and not giving at all, and does not constitute a new direction in the soul. The additional midot, netzach, hod, and yesad, are not primary midot like chesed and gevura, but secondary midot that are amplifications and mutations of the primary midot.
Right. Okay, so the battle of the soul, I think, well defined by the Tanya right here, speaks of the battle between really two separate emotions, love and awe, or in Hebrew, ahava ve'yira. Now, if you think about it in terms of relationships in general, because after all, the soul has a relationship with God. That's all it desires. So if you think about it in terms of relationship, you need love, but you also need respect or awe. Now, they are two separate emotions, and we've spoken about this a little bit in the past. Love draws two people close to one another. When I love someone, I want to be close to them. When I respect someone, I keep a little distance, because I have this awe, this yira, which he speaks about here. So in a way, they create two separate reactions. Now, a perfect relationship is a relationship where I know when to come close, when to love, but I also know when to stay a little bit afar and to keep my distance and to have that respect kick in. Now, in our relationship with God, it's the same thing. God sometimes wants us to go out to the world, express his love to the world, and be as engaged as could be. But sometimes also God says, you know what? No. Now it's time to back off a little bit and to focus on the self, focus on self-meditation. And it's true. All those who give a lot know that sometimes you give so much that you lose yourself in that giving. And if you lose yourself in that giving, then you won't really be able to continue to give, because you won't have a self to give from. You know, there's a verse in the Song of Songs by King Solomon that says, that they placed me the keeper of, or the guardian of vineyards, but I forgot to keep my own vineyard. Sometimes you're always keeping, you're always giving, that you lose that ability to keep your own vineyard. What happened to your vineyard? Now, if you don't have your own vineyard, if you can't keep that vineyard, you won't have from which to give. The well won't be able to give the water that it needs to give if it doesn't take care of itself. And in a way, that's the relationship the soul has with God. Sometimes God tells the soul, go ahead, it's time for you to change the world. And sometimes says, no. Now focus on yourself. And by the way, in the Jewish calendar, and I think that's the brilliance of the Jewish calendar, we have times that are clearly for giving, clearly for going out, clearly for changing the world. And there are times for which we say, God tells us, no, now just focus on the soul, just focus on Yirah, just focus on yourself. I think the month of Tishrei, the opening month of the year, has both in very clear terms. The first part of Tishrei is where we focus on the self-meditation, self-reflection, self-introspection. The first 10 days, right, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are 10 days of Teshuvah. Yom Kippur is the ultimate day in which we focus on the self and ask for forgiveness. And then after Yom Kippur ends, then what are we asked to do? To go out to the world, to build a sukkah in the world, to go and change the world, bring that holiness, that divinity, or that water that our well was filled with during those 10 days, and then go out to the world and bring its power to it. So again, in the Jewish calendar, you have times like this. If you're always giving, then you'll run out. If you're never giving, then you'll overflow, and it will somehow kill the well within. So you have to find a fine balance between the two. It's interesting to note, just to go on a deeper level, but it says that, and Tanya speaks about this a lot, much later on, in the 30s, in the late 30s, chapter 39, I think, where he says that the prayers that we have each and every day, they can only fly to the heavens with two separate wings: the wing of ahava, of love, and the wing of yirah, of awe. If you have both wings, then the prayer will fly all the way to God. What does this mean? That if you're praying to God and you have those two emotions, but not only those two emotions, those two actions. If you're a person that gives, but also a person that knows how to focus and refine the self, then the prayer will come from the purest, from a purest being, a being that knows the balance between giving and also focusing on the self. And God listens to prayers from purest beings. If the prayer comes from someone, or from a being, or from a state of mind that knows no love and knows no awe, then the prayer can't fly off, can't fly out to the heavens, can't reach God. There's a story about the Baal Shem Tov, again, a very mystical story, of the founder of the Hasidic movement, who once walked into a synagogue and he said, "It's too stuffy in here. I can't, there's no room for me." And I asked him, "What do you mean it's too stuffy? There's plenty of room." And he said, No. All these prayers that the people in here are praying are staying in this room because they have no wings. So it's stuffy with prayers. I have no room. I can't find any room to sit in. The synagogue is filled with those prayers that didn't fly directly to God. But I think it's true for prayers. It's true in general for life. Life takes off when I have a healthy balance between love and respect, love and awe, between giving and, again, focusing on the self. I think it's true again in relationships. I think it's true in self-refinement. Self-refinement includes both of these actions. Part of self-refinement is focusing on the self and thinking, meditating and so on, but part of self-refinement, giving. There's no greater benefit to the person than giving. They say that the giver, of course, benefits much more than the taker. Again, because you refine yourself through giving. So even in self-refinement, you find these two aspects of the soul, of the being, love and awe. I'll add just one more thing regarding love and awe. And what's interesting is this, and that is that going back to the conversation of last week, we don't always know when it's time to give and when it's time to focus on the self. But there is one point where we do, I mean, where there's a clear sign that we have to give, not necessarily focus on the self. When there's a mitzvah that can only be done by me, when there's an opportunity that's presented right now in front of me, and if I don't do it, it won't get done, then I know that it's God's calling to exercise ahava, to exercise love, and to exercise giving. If at that moment you think, oh, okay, no, I'll let someone else do this mitzvah, or I'll get back to it tomorrow, or you find all sorts of excuses not to do it at that moment. And you find excuses including, oh, let me focus on Ira, let me focus on self-refinement. And then that mitzvah doesn't get done. Then you know that all of your feelings of wanting to self-refine really came from the evil inclination. It wasn't part of the soul's desire because the mitzvah didn't get done. So when there's a mitzvah to get done, that's why the halacha says, Jewish law says, mitzvah ba'al yadcha, al tachmitzena. If a mitzvah comes to in front of you, if a mitzvah needs to be done, don't let it rot, so to speak, because you have to do it. God put it in front of your face right there and then because he wants you to do it. And if you have all these excuses, no, right now I'm going to meditate and refine myself and so on, then that's not coming from any type of divine calling. So we can have an indication of when to exercise the ahava of the soul when it's a mitzvah that is presented to us and it's an opportunity that needs to be seized right there and then. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. I mean, there's one more thing I want to say, but again, this is supposed to be more of a discussion. So if you have any thoughts, any comments, disagreements, please, Margot.
I think, so as you're saying all this, what it's relating to is, first of all, through meditation and prayer, we develop a sense of the inner self or the self. And if you don't have that, you can't, it's like the rudder on a ship.
Right.
And you feel it, and you can feel it palpably, and you can feel when you go against it as well.
Right.
And it makes it, but then again, there are people who don't have it, or who have very little, or it doesn't come when they need it. And it's like, what am I supposed to do? What's right or wrong to do in this situation? I don't know.
Right. No,
don't you think usually they do know? They do know. It's just they don't want to know.
Right. There are people like that too.
Yeah.
They know deep inside.
There's that too. There are people who don't. It's usually, well, because I'm talking about in therapy, there are people who don't, they've blocked that off, the inner voice, because it wasn't safe and it wasn't part of the family culture or whatever. There were dysfunctional situations, and people can block that off and just live out there with no in here. So that's true, but yeah, we can also have resistance to it and try to avoid it. But
right.
Yeah, it's like, and then even if you're in tune with it, sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not.
Right. No, it's true. Absolutely. And I think, we spoke about the Jewish calendar, but I think that the Jewish day is built in such a fashion. I think the Jewish life in general is also built in such a fashion. Think about this. The onset of the day, we are told to pray. Why? Because you can't go out to the world during the day if you haven't refilled the water in here of this well, so to speak. So we pray. Then we go out to the world, and then it's time for Ava. Then it's time for giving. Same. That's the Jewish day. And then, by the way, at the end of the day, in the middle of the day, we need to refill a little bit. So we pray Mincha in the afternoon. And then Arvit, at the end of the day, we also need to refill for the next day, or for the night, and then the next day too. So there are moments of refilling during the day, which are moments of Yira, and then we can be fully engaged in Ava during the day too. I think life in general is like that too. The first part of our life, what do? Do we spend going out to the world and changing the no? First part of the world, you have to first refill your well here. So as a child, you go and you study, and you have to focus on yourself, and you focus on being, and then on fully being. And then the second part of your life, then that's the time where you actually can give and give and give. I'll share with you just a personal observation, but it always, in a way, sort of, I mean, it was a puzzle to me until it became so clear. It was a simple solution to this puzzle. But how all the greats, you name all the greats who changed the world, whether in the secular world or in the Jewish world, from Steve Jobs to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, how come, if their goal really, their purpose was to change the world, how come they didn't change the world from the age of 10? How come from the age of 20? Why did they start so late? The Lubavitcher Rebbe assumed the role of leadership at, I think, at the age of 50 or something like that. Why so late? But it's not that they were starting late. Their first part of life was actually one completely with the second part of life. They needed that first part in order to then have that second part. Without the first part, they will have never been able to change the world. So life is also built in such a way. But just like life is built in such a way, and the Jewish calendar is built in such a way, and the day is built in such a way, we too have to be built in such a way, each and every day. During different segments of the day, there are times in which we say stop. Now we're focusing on the self, on refilling ourselves here, and there are times that we have to go out. Now, again, it's difficult to say stop sometimes, and it's difficult to go out. And we have to be completely in tune with ourselves to know when that stop comes, and to stop when it does come, and when that giving comes, and to know how to change, to shift gears to giving when that calling comes. But that's the idea. We see that God plays those two sides all the time, whether in the calendar, whether in life, whether in the day. And we too, therefore, have to be in tune with God's play of Ahava and Yira. Now, to go a little bit deeper into this, and that's the only other thing I wanted to add to this discussion, and that is that there are sometimes times where we give and times where we don't. And there are sometimes times where the giving is actually, where love is actually awe, and awe is actually love, where they are intertwined completely. What do I mean by that? So take parenting, for example. In parenting, I give to my children all the time, but sometimes part of the giving is saying no. I'm teaching them not to be disciplined, but at the same time also to say, you know what, this is not good for you. I want to teach you discipline. I want to give you health, emotional health, psychological health, and therefore I have to say no. So the no really is a yes. It's a yes for good health. It's a yes for good vision in life. It's a yes for good discipline. It's a yes for good behavior. But it comes out as a no. So sometimes they are very much intertwined. The love comes in the form of awe. And sometimes the awe comes in the form of love. Again, back to parenting. Sometimes I say yes, but it's really a no. How? So if I teach my child to walk, for example, and I say, yes, go ahead, walk by yourself. I know my child will fall. So it's a yes, it's a love, go, but it's a no, because it's gonna fall. It's gonna hurt. It's a side of discipline. So it's a love disguised by an awe. So sometimes they're intertwined, and the wise man knows how to keep them together or keep them apart when need be. So, and then I think that's the secret of education in general, or secret of relationships. Sometimes I say yes, but it's a no. Sometimes I say no, but it's a yes. So Ava and Yira don't always have to be apart. I think most of the time they are apart, but sometimes they also come together to create that perfect balance. Ava and Yira together. And again, that takes a lot of wisdom to put them together, to know how to put them together. But I will share with you the story. I think it was a story of the Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, who maybe Rabbi, I'm not sure of the Hasidic master, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev of the Kotzker Rebbe of 200 years ago. And Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev was once approached by one of his students who said to Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, you seem to be a man that loves Israel. He was called, loves people and always advocates for them. He was in fact called the advocate, Sanigoran Shel Israel, the advocate of Israel, because he always had a good thing to say about them. So the student asked Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev, can you please teach me the art of advocating for people? Sometimes all I can see is negativity. All I can do is judge people. How do you find a way to always see the positive side in people? And Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev took him outside and he showed him a fire, a pillar of fire. And Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev asked this man, what do you see? And the man says, I see a fire consuming wood, consuming everything that it just can, spreading its flames. And Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev says, well, instead of focusing on the inside of the fire, how about you focus on the outside of the fire? See how the fire is illuminating the world. See of the impact, look at the impact of the fire. And then you'll see the positive side of the fire instead of seeing the negative side of the fire. And Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev said, you see, fire in of itself is a combination of yes and no. It consumes, but it also illuminates. And in a way, I think it's true. I mean, it's a nice spiritual concept and we can meditate on it for hours. But I think it's true for any being or any negative side that we may have during the day. Sometimes we see a person in a very negative light. But there's also a switch of perspective in which we have to start seeing the yes, start seeing the ahava, the light. And sometimes it takes that shift of looking at the greater picture, seeing not just the fire itself, but what it's causing throughout the world. Just a shift of perspective. Sometimes we have to look at the yes within the no. In every being, there's a yes. In every moment, there is a yes. In every place, there is a yes. Sometimes all we can see is a no, but really God likes to function with the yes and no together. We human beings, because maybe we so compartmentalized and our minds work in a very narrow way, we have to have a compartment for the love and a compartment for the respect, for the awe. But truthfully, God knows how to put them together all the time. We only sometimes, parenting again, in parenting, there's a yes, sometimes that's a no, and there's a no, sometimes that's a yes. So then we know how to put them together. But God knows how to put these two together all the time. For him, it's not two different compartments. For him, it's one compartment. In every yes, there's a no, and every no, there's a yes. Like Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev was showing this man in fire, with the analogy of fire. So, anyhow, so these are the two emotions. Most of the time, they are separate. Some of the time they come together, and God puts them together more often than we can. Any other comment? And then I want to continue a little bit more.
A comment and a question.
Please, Amy.
This is Amy. So we've talked a lot about consistency.
Yes.
And so I'm just thinking particularly of mothers. I see this like half men on this call, but basically, what if both happen at the same time? It's like, it's your time that's, and I'm going to put it in mother terms, right? It's your time that's set aside to nurture yourself, and your child needs something.
Right.
Right. And so women have a tendency to give until they give themselves away, and there's nothing left. So let's say it's the time for morning prayer and there's an emergency that needs your attention. Is there anything religiously that says this is the thing you do first?
So it's a good question, and I think it relates. I'm going to answer it, but I want to give a small introduction to it. I think it relates to this discussion for men too, and to this idea for everyone. That is that very often we can and we should balance the love and the awe ahead of time. I think that it's good to have a schedule in which we say to ourselves, you know what, from 10 to 12, I do love, and from 12 to 1, I do awe, and not engage just with myself. So very often, that's what I would suggest people, that's what I suggest myself too, you know, to have a clear plan of when that doesn't always work, but at least to think that you have a plan, that you'll be engaged in love for these hours, and you'll be engaged in self-refinement for these hours. You know, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, by the way, speaking of him, he had a very clear plan of the day. There were times in which he would lock himself in his study and engage in self-refinement. And there were times he would, you know, the man who gave everything he could, yes, engaged in study, engaged in self-reflection. And there were times in which he opened his study and went out to the world. I think it's true for parenting too, and even for mothers, that yes, mothers are constantly attacked, and they are always, giving and giving and giving to their children, that this giving can become draining. And therefore, I think having a schedule of this is when I do this, but now, right now, it's mommy time. I'm sorry. Children, this is out of bounds. I think that's one way of wait, I want to say hello to Harlow over there. Come here. This is my principle in Zoom. Those of you who've been in Zoom with me long enough, they know that when I see children, I have to say hello to them. Harlow, where is she? Hi, good morning. Happy to see you. How are you? Good. Good, I miss you.
We miss you.
Right, good. But speaking of children and mothers, there we have a perfect example. Sometimes it's mommy time, sometimes fine. That's one thing. Another thing is this. Speaking of the awe and the love together, that's much more complicated and much more complex. But speaking of bringing them together, sometimes, yes, I am, and I do this myself. Maybe it's a bad thing, maybe not. But sometimes I am with my children. And I know that, one second, I've given them already. I've given to them already. I've devoted myself to them already. And okay, but I have to be with them because they constantly are showering me, pulling my strings. So I'm with them, but I'm really not with them. So I'm with them with a book, and I let them fight, and I won't interfere with every stupid fight that they're engaging in. And if they want to eat, let them go eat. I don't have to serve them dinner right now because I already did. This is the 4th dinner tonight. So I'm with them, but I'm not with them. I'm combining the love and the awe together. And sometimes that's what needs to be done also. I mean, it's better to have a pre-planned schedule, but if I have no choice because there needs to be an adult in the room, fine. So I'll be there with my book, and I'll be there with my whatever it is. So that's the love and the awe together. One last thing, I will say this, and I think that, in general, everyone has to figure out, and this is generally for mothers and for fathers too, or for every human being. I think everyone has to figure out the day in which they are most productive, the hours in which they are most productive during the 24-hour day, whether at night or whether during the day. I, for example, am more of a morning person. So I like I said to myself a few years ago, you know what? If I'm a morning person and I feel most productive then maybe I should wake up earlier and focus on awe, on yira, on self-refinement then, because that's when I can really make the best out of those hours for myself. So I wake up at 4:30 in the morning, and I do my studying, I focus on myself, and then I can give in a much more productive way during the day. Then the day starts, and you're giving so much because you filled yourself up with so much, because I figure out what my productive hours are of the day. I think artists do this. I think artists know the hours in which they are most productive or filled with most inspiration. And they've blocked those hours. The good artists know how to block those hours and say, I'm going to engage in art at that moment. I think every one of us, now some people are night owls. Some people are afternoon people. But every one of us here has to figure out what are the hours in which we are most productive. And then I would suggest to focus on yira, to focus on self-refinement, then on self-meditation, then, because that's when we can fill our well with effectiveness. So that's just a little tip, also for mothers and also for fathers and for just regular human beings. Okay. All right. Any other question? And then we can continue just a little bit. Or comments, disagreements? No. Fine. So let's continue here with da'at implies attachment and union. Does anyone want to read? Just a few more lines. I think this point is important. Margot, please.
Da'at implies attachment and union, as in the verse, and Adam knew Eve. Da'at is the third of the three matrices listed earlier, Chokma, Bina, and Da'at. As we explained, Chokma is the faculty for apprehending the initial flash of perception, whereas Bina is the faculty for analytic and synthetic thought. Da'at, on the other hand, is not an intellectual faculty, but the capacity to perform connections between the faculties. Da'at includes a higher da'at and a lower da'at. Lower da'at, discussed here, is the capacity to build a personal relationship with the subject. It is thus the bridge between the mind and the emotions, relating what has been perceived by Chokma and understood by Bina to the 7 midot, where it will stimulate emotional feeling. Higher da'at, discussed elsewhere, is what connects Chokma and Bina.
Right. Okay, so let's stop here. I want to, so these are all powerful, a powerful concept. We spoke about Chokhmah, which is that first spark of wisdom, that when someone all of a sudden has this brilliant idea. Bina, the second step, is the ability to develop that spark of wisdom, and that is then to put into practice. And in order to put into practice, you need the 7 attributes, you need the emotions, you need the knowledge of connecting. Connecting yourself, your idea, with the rest of the world. That's why Da'at is also called connection, because it's the ability to take everything that you developed in here and then bring it to the world, bring it to people. That's Da'at, that motion from here to the world is Da'at. And that's what we'll be focusing on now. Now again, for Da'at, you need to know when to come close and when to stay a little bit afar. You need to know the art of connection, but all of this is Da'at. I do want to speak about what he'll speak about a little bit further, but he touches this topic here a little bit, and that is the bridge between the mind and the emotions. This bridge is a person. Let's speak a little bit about the art of connection as he speaks about it here. The art of connection is an art in which we might think that we are delivering our ideas from here to the person, or even our emotions from here to the person. That's usually the way connection is defined in the outside world. If you want to connect to someone, then bring what you have in here or in here to the other person, and you'll be connecting. The Tanya flips that completely to the other side. The Tanya thinks that it's the exact opposite. The art of connection is not asking yourself, what can I bring from me to the other? But it's what can the other bring to me? And what is there in the other that I can relate to? Once I've created that connection between the other to me, it's not me trying to impose myself on the other. Quite the opposite. I'm completely open for the other. It's the other coming to me. I have no agenda whatsoever. That's how you connect. Not by taking you and trying to somehow force that you in the other or merge that you with the other. That doesn't work. That's not connection. That's how the world might say is connection, but that's not connection. Connection is being completely empty, opening yourself up completely, being a vessel, as it says, and seeing how that you, that other, can then connect to you. Once that connection is created, then I can take what I have in here and say, you know what, thank you. I'm one with you now. And by the way, I have this for you and have that for you. That's the art of connection in general. That's Da'at. Da'at is in a way, I would call it, it's unlearning or emptying yourself out. That's the first step of Da'at. Being completely humble. Saying, you know what, yes, I have my Chokhmah and Bina, I developed it. I have so much to offer. I had the spark of wisdom that I was able to turn into a genius idea, a genius business plan. But right now, it's not about this. Right now, I have to put this aside. Then let the other connect to me. Let me be open completely to the other. Then I'll go back to that drawer, take the business plan out and see if it fits with the other. But I cannot connect to the other if I do not allow the other to permeate myself without any agenda. That's the art of connection. That's why, you know, there's a brilliant, and I've mentioned the story in the past, but there's a great story about multiple stories that show this, but a story about a future Rebbe who was just 8 years old. And he was playing with his brother, 6-year-old brother, the game of rabbi and student. And the 8-year-old brother tells the 6-year-old brother, I'm the rabbi, you the student, go ask me any question you want. The 6-year-old came and he asked him a question. He said, look, I think it was the question, I forgot to say the blessing over the meal yesterday. What can I do about it? And the older brother, the rabbi, the 8-year-old brother says, oh, it's easy. Next time you eat, just say a blessing with even more intention. And the 6-year-old brother tells the 8-year-old brother, you're a fake rabbi. He says, what do you mean you're a fake rabbi? I'm a rabbi, I told you what to do. And the 6-year-old tells the 8-year-old, no, you're a fake rabbi because a real rabbi would have sighed first before giving me a solution to my problem. He would have felt me. A real rabbi, it's not about him. It's not about, oh, I have my solutions, I have my ideas, I'm going to throw them on you. No, the real rabbi first opens himself up completely. It's not about his ideas. Let the other enter me. That's real connection. Once the other enters me and I feel the other, I sigh, that's when I can go back to the drawer and give him my solution. They say about a great Hasidic rabbi, Rabbi Dov Ber, Schneerson, who would sweat profusely during private audiences to the point that he has to change his clothes 4 times. Now, once someone asked him, why do you have to change your clothes so many times during a private audience with someone? You sweat so much. We've never seen you sweat that much. And he said, it's very simple. When someone comes to me and he shares with me a problem, first I have to get out of my own personal clothes and enter his clothes. So that already is a big effort that makes me sweat. But then when I'm in his clothes, I can only see the problem. I can't find a solution to it, to the problem. So I have to once again undress myself from his clothes and come back to the rabbi's clothes. That again causes me to sweat a lot. Now when I'm back with the rabbi's clothes, I can find a solution to the problem that I just felt. But I can't apply, I don't know how to apply the problem yet. So I have to again undress myself as a rabbi and go back to his clothes to not apply the solution to the problem. Once I've applied the solution to the problem, then I undress myself and go back to being in my clothes to being a rabbi. But I change my clothes 4 times and that's why I sweat so profusely and I need to change my clothes also 4 times. But again, that's the ability of saying, you know what, it's not about me. I might have my solutions, I might have my wisdom, but that is first and foremost about undressing myself, allowing the other to permeate me, feeling the other, sighing with the other, that in a way, empathizing with the other to the point that he's completely one with me. That's the art of connection. Once I can connect with the other in such a way where he's entered my psyche, my being completely, then I can bring in the Chokhmah and Bina and apply that to the Da'at, to that art of connection that was created. That's the big idea, and he'll be developing this idea a lot now in the next few pages.